Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Hi, good
Okay.
evening. You can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you. You are quite visible and you are in a very good network connectivity. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Right on time. Again, a very warm good evening, everyone. And warm because it's warm. It's not like December over here. It's the hottest December which we are in right now. But yeah,
That's true.
today we have with us from Pharma Ace. Just to give a brief introduction, what's there on LinkedIn is she has done her BSc in 2012 from Ferguson's College, Pune. Right after that, she has completed her MBA from Sihagarh College, and then she has also done a certification in HR Analytics from IIM Rohtak. And then after that, she has worked as an HR analyst at Trust Vista. Following that, she has started working with Pharma Ace, and she started as a senior executive, then assistant manager, and right now she is working as a manager in HR role at Pharma Ace. To tell you about Pharma Ace, it's a predominantly analytics-based company for pharmaceutical industries, specializing in pharmaceutical sector, handling quite a big names of clients, serving a lot of US-based clients, having office in Pune. Do you have like further offices in India? I guess in
We
Hyderabad.
have, yes, we have another office in Hyderabad too.
Perfect. So this is in short about your introduction. I mean, I'm just telling what's there, which everyone would know by reading your LinkedIn. I'll give you a minute if you want to add something.
It actually accommodates everything, whatever you said. But yeah, I mean, I would want to address one question which usually is asked to me and has always been asked to me when I'm doing my own interviews with other companies. It's that why did you switch from a life sciences? Probably even you must have got that question. Why did she move? Yeah, like from a core life sciences field to then an MBA. Chalo, theek hai, it's still something that people do, but then why into analytics? And I think more of our conversation is going to be directed towards analytics. Okay, so very interestingly, to give you like an honest answer, with life sciences as your bachelor's, you have very limited scope of your masters. You either do your MTech or you either do your MSc, and then probably end up with a research role. Of course, somebody who's that involves a lot of patience is what I believe, because it you have to dedicate a lot of your time to research and spend a lot of time probably even teaching to some extent, but that definitely is not going to give you the scope or the actual scenario of how exactly the industry in general works, in layman and in understandable language, how corporate works, right? And all my growing and all my educational years, academic years, I always wanted to be into a field where I'm interacting with people a lot. And lately, when I started actually using analytics, and I have again understood that I'm really good with it. I have always been a critical thinker. So I mean, moving from so coming back to the question, the main intention for me to move from BSc Life Sciences to an MBA program was that I wanted to get into corporate, because I always fancied that. But then I ended up doing analytics, and now I know that I'm actually pursuing something I really like to do. So yeah, so I'm not very sure how many of y'all are from the life sciences background, but then you should definitely give it a shot, because I'm like a living example that if you take up something into analytics and then MBA, because data and analytics is our future, you'll definitely enjoy number crunching and data if you and just move away from like the mainstream courses that we usually do. So yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing this up, Priyanka. That
it's very unusual, yeah.
yes, yes. I mean, you have best of two worlds in your profile, from analytics as well as HR.
Right.
It's best of two worlds what you have entered in from
Right.
science background.
And I would definitely, I'm that flag bearer for it. If people should get into analytics, even if if you're doing these mainstream courses of HR, people think that it is okay. It's a very funny thing, but then people think it's only rangoli making or into HR, but that's not the thing. I've like close to 6 years of experience, and I've never made rangoli. So yeah.
Okay, no, I mean that's how layman thinks that HR does just salaries, already activities and monthly and stuff. Perfect. So, I mean, how does your day-to-day role looks like
Right.
when you were in your previous organization, where you were the HR analyst? I'll not, because now it would be majorly a leadership role wherein you are managing.
Right. Right.
The hard stuff is being done by your subordinates. But how
Mhm.
was your first role? What were you learning? What
Right.
were that
Right.
you did over there?
Actually, it's the other way around. I'll tell you why. Because I'll give you the gist of what I was doing with my previous organization and now as well. With my previous organization, it was my first stint. I just started off fresh out of college, no experience. I just had internship experiences. There, as an HR analyst, again, the core was of course HR. I've always been into talent acquisition and hiring. I've done both, lateral and mass hiring as well. I've done a lot of campus hiring. And I tell you, when we are actually doing campus hiring, it's more insightful because you're dealing with a lot of data, right? So as an HR analyst, again, we started the analytics bit came to me only after I completed a year over there. I mean, the second year at Resista was more into analytics because the first year was more dedicated towards understanding how talent acquisition and how campus hiring actually works and how the data that we are procuring, and especially so when you're talking about talent acquisition, people think that it's like a very simple process that you're talking to somebody on call and then you understand, you're doing your HR interview and just shortlisting and the interview is done. But that is not how it is. There is an entire, I'll give you the process, okay? So there's an entire pre-screening process, a form that we collect the data with. So this, you need to relate. I'm not, okay, by the way, do we have any MBA professionals or all of them are MBA professionals here?
No, so there would be a mixed crowd. I'll give you an idea of the crowd. 33% is fairly from college, those who are doing their bachelor's, and around 25% is freshers, those who have a degree. It could be BSc, BCom, engineering, and others. And
Right.
then remaining 25% are working professionals who might have had their post-graduation in MBA and then PhD and others, all
Got
doing jobs and now want to migrate into analytics.
Got
Like
it.
someone in HR and now they are learning with us HR analytics and then they want to switch from HR to HR analytics, something of that sort.
Got it. So yeah, why I ask this question is because I'll tell you how the concepts that we learn into our management courses, how we actually implemented during, my first stint. When I say we are collecting the forms, it's not only just a part of the process. We are actually doing sampling. We get a lot of data, and then we bucket the data. I mean, we bucket the candidates as per our requirements. So initially we get the requisitions, then we get the forms, then we are doing the bucketing. That is again segmentation to some extent, and then we do the process. By the end of the process, when a hiring manager decides that we need to hire this particular person, you have both the quantitative and qualitative kind of data, where by quantitative I mean there is a set of data about the candidate's academic qualifications. By qualitative I mean the nature, how well the interview went, how reactive he was, what was his attitude, etc. These are all qualitative kind of information that we collect. So and when so we started off, analytics was not something Trezista was doing back then. We were a set of people who actually started, working on it. And we started off pretty easy and pretty simple through Excel. I mean, pivots banake, normal charts banake. That is how we started doing our analysis. So, Trezista, by the way, to give you an understanding what they do, they are they are driven towards data and analytics, but only for the financial sector. Uh, so it's a we used to hire from top tier management consulting firms like Bain and McKinsey, etc. And then likewise, we also went to IIMs and IITs only to hire for all the roles. Um, so we started off very simple through Excel. And then we used to hire in bunches. So they had these cycles where we used to hire close to 35 or 40 people every quarter, right? So you understand, to hire 30, 40 odd folks, there's a concept of back calculation into talent acquisition. So you back calculate. So if you want 40 people to hit your floor, you have to do interviews for almost double the number. So you do 80 interviews. For your people to get, for you to do 80 interviews, you have to do approximately 120-ish odd interviews, and likewise. So that is why you end up, engaging a pool of close to 500 odd folks who are doing your pre-screening. So you understand the data that we get and the data that we can play with. So every quarter we started getting a lot of data. So how data actually influence our decision making, and then we could tap into the right source or the right people, was because we started making and maintaining all this data. So that is when we actually, I got the taste of analytics. Oh, okay, ye bhi ho sakta hai. It's not the traditional, picking up the phone and calling people. That was not something that, I was doing that also, but then it was not the only thing that I was doing, right? And then very interestingly, we just did a pilot project, which actually the management really liked, and then we started implementing that for our campus hiring as well. And today, I think Trezista has like an HR analytics department in itself, and all the analysts sit and then they do the exercise. Of course, there must have been refinement to the processes that we set, but that is how we actually started off with HR analytics within Trezista. With PharmaAce, again, so I joined PharmaAce when we were like almost 130 odd folks. Today we are almost 600 only in Pune, and I started off only in 2020, so it's almost only 4 years. We have expanded to Hyderabad, and then we have other offices coming up soon in India as well. So you understand the massive hiring and growth rate that we have seen. Again, with those learnings at Trezista, I came to PharmaAce, and PharmaAce was like a clean slate. They had nothing to do with HR analytics. They used to hire like close to 4, 5, 10 odd folks in a year, to hiring 200, 250 and only 100 laterals in a year. We transitioned to that extent, and that was the rate that we grew. Again, so how analytics helped me making my decisions? Firstly, so it's not only talent acquisition, but also my other functions within HR, be it engagements, be it operations. How my data analytics helped me into HR operations, which is like our day-to-day functions, how we function on a daily basis. If we are onboarding certain folks, how do we do it? How data actually helps me is because, of course, so when you're maintaining something, it's as simple as writing in a notebook, right, Anirudh? So you are writing something Likewise, we are maintaining the data, and I know when I go back and look at my, row number this or column number this, I know, okay, this had happened when I was onboarding this particular candidate. So that is a learning for me. That's a learning for me and for my management as well. So it's as simple as bookkeeping, but um, but then it influences, and you end up taking right decisions for all your processes. So coming back to the talent acquisition bit of it, um, because we had a lot of data, actually, when we started maintaining the data and when we started analyzing, um, we started tapping into different organizations, our competitors. So we started maintaining data by data basis as per the companies. What
Okay.
kind of people a particular organization hires, what courses do they hire from, and what are their salary bands. To that extent, we went. I mean, we have to. So it gave us so many insights, which actually helped us even design our own salary grid for that.
You
Right?
had reference. Correct.
Yeah, we had multiple references. So that is how it's very HR. I think now it's moving more towards the data driven. It's not only the other functions or other industries that are excelling into analytics, it is also HR. And I think uh, it the effect that it has to our industry or HR as professionals, it has given us that power. It has empowered us to take the right decisions, and then and it also gives the our management the confidence that, I mean, uh, you go with insights to them. Hey, listen, this is not what we need to do. This is also helps us forecast the numbers for our hiring, so we understand there have been major shifts in the pharmaceutical industry. Probably we'll talk about it later during our chat, but then and it's very interesting. I did a very recent project, very very unique within the industry. We'll talk about it. I'm not very sure if you have a question, but I'll definitely take some time to talk about that. So yeah.
So, I mean, what you have beautifully explained the role of analytics in your current and previous organization. You mentioned that you used Excel to streamline the processes, and probably what I can make out is having you created some extra feature sets out of the CV, like how is the behavior, which won't be there as a part of their academia or something. You created some extra features, and then probably you might be compiling and grading them, and then filtering out according to
Yeah.
that whoever ranks first is the
Right.
second, third choice
Right.
for that, right?
Right.
And then probably you might be having a candidate score as well, which might be quantifying in the end, like we
Correct.
have lead score,
Correct.
Sybil score, candidate
Right.
score, something of that
Right.
sort. So there, and then thresholds might also be there. But yes, doing Excel is pretty easy to do and standardized thing, what I can imagine. Are there any other tools which you use like Power BI or Python? So HRMS is fine. I mean, at our organization, we use Zoho People. So I've been using Zoho People for last 4 to 5 years. It's a wonderful HRM, and then you can export the data and play around with it in other tools.
Right.
So, what's your take on these tools and technologies which which play as a catalyst to help us in doing a better analytics? Do you use something of that sort now?
Actually, even we use Zoho for that matter. So we use Zoho Suite for our, for all our HR processes. Zoho People, then we have Zoho Recruit for our recruitment processes. We have the other Zoho applications that we use. In addition to Excel, so a lot of our data that's being maintained, of course, it's on Excel, but then I am, working very closely with our tech team. And when you said Power BI, for our dashboarding purposes, we use Tableau, because now that it's becoming very difficult, because we have this massive data in place. So we have transitioned a lot of it to our tech team, and they are, when it comes to visualizations, we are using Tableau. at this point in time. But then now we have a lot of HR tools that are going to give us, reports and all our analytics. Uh, we have these softwares. I mean to say, not very tool specific. I mean, not very tech specific. Those Tableau and all. At the end of the day, you give the data. Your tech team is going to work on it, and then they are going to give us the dashboards, right? We have we have softwares that enable HRs to actually create their own charts. And I think Zoho itself has one such kind of an application that we are exploring. So yeah, for
And
now,
talking about this analytics, like it's pretty much same as W Power BI, but it's a different tool altogether.
very easy. I mean, when it comes to when you're comparing Power BI, Tableau, etc., Zoho Analytics for that matter is going to be very user friendly.
Same ecosystem. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you use that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Any challenges what you might have faced while analyzing or in HR industry with data? What was difficult to crack? Any such incidents which you would like to mention?
Initially, I mean, we'll talk about Pharma.Ace because with Resista we still had some data maintained in certain format. With Pharma.Ace, we started off maintaining data, collecting data in a particular manner, which initially we had issues with, and then we streamlined the processes as per our understanding and convenience, because then it gets as per our use. So it's not only me who is, so of course I'm being part of HR, but then I have other stakeholders who also leverage the data. So firstly, maintenance, understanding the data again. Initially it was a problem. The other major problem, I think we still do not have a solution to it, is how do you track or how do you maintain the qualitative data for that matter. Quantitative, it's very easy, you have your applications, and then for example, we are using Zoho People and Zoho Recruit, you're uploading everything, and when you have to do an analysis, you just pull down an Excel and you have everything ready. But then qualitatively, as we were growing, so I told you that we grew from 120 to almost 300, 400 within a span during COVID, by the way. So we underwent so many qualitative experiences with candidates, with the kind of people that we were hiring. It became a challenge for us to actually start maintaining the data in terms of qualitative. So I'm talking to a particular candidate. I have insights, this is happening in the market, that is happening in the market, but that's not always feasible for me to actually sit down and take notes of it. Right? Everything that I speak to a particular candidate, I understand, okay, this is happening in the industry, this organization is laying off people. So all these things, we still are figuring out how we can, record it, because it's very important for these are actually, this bit of the information is very important to be recorded, especially in talent acquisition, because that is how we are going to make our hiring, or we are going to take our decisions for our next hires. You understand? So recently when so let's take a current scenario. Last year and this year, in general, the pharma industry has slowed down. Right?
Yeah.
So we did not have a lot of hirings to do, correct? So it gave us a lot of time to do our research, to understand what exactly is happening in the industry, why people are not hiring, and if we have to hire, what kind of people and what kind of institutes or campuses that we should be tapping in, what kind of, and it all starts with what kind of work we are going to get, right? What kind of projects are going to come our way, what kind of work we are going to get. Then we have very specific roles to hire for, and it's like a very niche industry. You wouldn't find. So when we are saying we hire forecasters, and the two within the pharma industry, it's like a very niche group of people who actually are experts within forecasting and within pharma forecasting for that matter. So when I started off hiring for this particular role, uh, it was very challenging because I knew people on the tips of my finger. You understand ki I have spoken to this person 2 months back and he's not interested, and I still remember the names of these forecasters because we were only like 200,
Yeah.
200, 250 odd forecasters within the entire industry I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So, tracking all of this and maintaining all of this initially and still, I mean, has been a issue. We have taken the very traditional way of maintaining databases, creating database for that matter. I mean, going through LinkedIn profiles, looking at their, so we have also gone to a extent kind of interests they have within in their LinkedIn profile. We also looked, for their social media where all they are writing their blogs and all. To that extent, we went and we actually started creating a database. So that so the quality, I mean, tracking all of this and maintaining all of this is a challenge, and I think it will be a challenge because the requirements that we work on, the kind of offers that we make, it is actually a little difficult to maintain the data and to have databases, at least in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, what you have said, there are multiple branches of questions coming in, so I'll take one by one.
Right.
When you say forecasters in pharmaceutical industries, I would just like you to bifurcate. Are these people who are experts and having degrees in pharmaceutical domain, like they know all the jargons in this, and as well as are good with tech, maybe Python and machine learning, because that's what is used to forecast. So what are the skill sets which you generally expect in these, as well as background, if you could highlight?
Right. Firstly, the initial approach of any consulting, a pharma consulting organization, is that they have their in-house forecasters. I mean, they make their own forecasters. They do their own trainings. Let's talk about PharmaAce. We have our extensive training programs in place. Anybody that we are hiring from campus or is a fresher undergoes like good 1.5 months of training. Robust training. I mean, it's not like our traditional book and paper training. They have case study trainings. They have sessions from experts. I mean, and then we are fortunate enough to have some industry, forecasters with like 14, 15, 16 years of experience, worked with multiple clients, and these sessions are taken by all these forecasters. So the traditional and the first approach to any organization to have a forecaster is that they train their own forecaster, right? When I'm going in the market to look for a particular forecaster, the first approach for me would be somebody, of course, who has some forecasting experience. But I'll tell you, usually people coming from engineering backgrounds end up into forecasting because there's a lot of number crunching there, right? In addition to the tools that you're talking about, of course, that is something that is trainable. And then initially, the traditional way of forecasting was through Excel only. So somebody who is expert in Excel and has good understanding of numbers and can do the calculations at the tip of its tongue, these are basically our forecasters. That's the basic skill set that a forecaster should have. Because so very good example. So when I was working with Resista, we were still hiring forecasters there as well, right? The financial forecasting is, so the basis, the foundation of forecasting, it's the same. We are just, what do we mean by forecasting? We are just anticipating what is going to happen, probably about a particular product or about a particular drug for that matter, right? So the foundation is the same. Uh, Financial may, of course, then there are various. So you have investment banking, you have private equity, you have forecasters within the other domains. Here you have when it comes to pharmaceuticals, it's more towards drug forecasting, vaccine forecasting, and then you have a lot of therapies also. So not necessarily somebody from the medical background is gets a chance to move into forecasting. It's more of a combination. So people doing their engineering within biotechnology, these are the most preferred set of people who and of course would want to make their careers into corporate. They are the most preferable bunch of people for us to pick up for forecasting. So that is how we do our hiring also from campuses. So we pick up biotech graduates, be it BTech, be it MTech. There are other functions within the pharma consulting that require BPharm, etc. as their bachelor's and master's degree. Here, when it comes to the more towards analytics and tech side, it's usually engineers that we pick up. There are other roles, of course. There are other roles where we require doctors, and we require PhD holders, and we require B Farm and M Farm folks. But here more focused. But then we have again. So it also depends. A lot of it is also dependent on the candidate's interests as well. So I have examples of all kind of people coming from various backgrounds. So there is somebody who's done his B Farm and M Farm and then done an MBA into pharmaceutical management and then is a forecaster today. So there are various courses. There are MBA courses also very specific to your pharma management and your pharma courses who move towards forecasting and who move towards analytics. So two domains that we usually work into pharma consulting, one is forecasting and the other is analytics. The analytics side, we need our core engineers coming from software. Again, the specialization within engineering is not important when it is into analytics, because at the end of the day, it is all data that you're working on in analytics. So whichever kind of data comes in, you are just looking at the numbers and you're number crunching into analytics. But then when it comes to forecasting, it needs a little bit of understanding of the drugs and what is the formulation of the drug, etc. So there we might end up choosing probably a biotech professional over a normal computer science engineer.
Perfect. I mean, if you were to bifurcate people from engineering and non-engineering background like the others, how is the ratio within your organization? Just a general overview.
We have maximum engineers.
Okay.
Because very specific to again pharma is, and I think most of our competitors also for that matter, engineering would be at least 65% of our crowd, engineers, rest everything, and by the 35% I mean it's going to be more towards pharma graduates, but not into analytics and forecasting. They are going to do completely different role like CI, which is competitive intelligence, which is again very very not very number related, but then it's more towards news reading and market research and those kind of things.
Okay, all right. Now going back again to the node and bifurcating to a different branch, you said that in terms of qualitative analysis of a profile, you track the interest of the candidate and then try to maintain a data what he does, not on LinkedIn and other places. So since all of our audience is in it to land a job, right? I mean, how important is it to have a social presence about the work and projects that anyone does after learning the skill sets? I want this answer from someone who keeps on looking at profiles and try and if you were to see a fresher and if you don't find something, even if you don't find him or her on LinkedIn, we might feel that does he even want a job or not, because he's not there on a professional platform.
Right.
And then someone who's there. So how important is it, and how important criteria it is to hire or take the first step? Because a lot of times HR reach out to people on LinkedIn, right? Like, are you looking
That
at
is
switching, or do you want to we try to bounty a candidate, right?
right.
So, what's the role of social presence in terms of the expertise which someone possesses?
It's very important. Okay, so as an HR, when I'm going through, so that is my day-to-day job. I'm looking at people's LinkedIn profiles, and it just takes a minute for any HR, and especially an experienced HR, to pick that one profile. Okay, this person is going to get hired. Three key things into your profile. One, should be uh, should be organized. You don't have to oversay a lot of things when you are actually designing. And by the way, it is as important as your Instagram profile. The
Right.
way you have your fancy Instagram profiles, it's very important in a professional, world, to have your LinkedIn profile up to the mark. So the first thing is keep it clean, keep it very simple. It have it so when you're writing your description also, for that matter, it will be very easy if you just highlight your skills that if you have any experience, if you have worked into a particular field, just highlight what you have worked on. That is going to attract me as an agent. I'm just going to it's not going to I don't have to spend a lot of time to scroll through, so I know, okay, he's highlighted that particular skill. Okay, that is what I'm looking for. I'll at least shortlist that candidate for the further process. We have so much of inflow of candidates and applications, because I mean, it is a volatile market. I understand the situation in the market is not very appropriate. So for you to stand out in that entire crowd, you have to just think from a human, from an uh, interviewer's perspective, probably. Okay, so if you keep yourself into my shoes, if you see something highlighted within your profile, and especially those are your skills, the HR is going to pick that one particular profile. Because not everybody is thinking from an HR's perspective. Everybody's thinking from a application's perspective. Definitely yes, because you are looking out for a job, but not from an HR perspective. So for me, again, so the first thing is keep your profile very clean, because then I know that you have highlighted your skills. I'm just going through your education, and I know you sit into my criteria. Done. You at least move to the next stage. You can expect a call from the HR, right? That is one. Second, you don't have to. Definitely, you should keep on reaching out to people from that organization. That helps. So if somebody, a lot of my friends and my colleagues ask, like, how is it that you get that one call from HR? How do you do that? Wow, what's that key to get that call from HR? So so all the organizations have these referral programs. Okay, right? You reach out to people from that particular organization, because if somebody internally is giving me a profile saying that, hey, listen, can you review this candidate? Of course, I'm going to give that preference to my employees. Say, understand that, okay, he must have spoken to it, and he knows, because he knows the culture, he knows what kind of work we have done. So it's going to, so मेरा पहला काम तो मेरा एम्प्लॉय करके दे देगा. So I don't have to sit, I don't have to do the initial screening, that is it relevant, is it not relevant. So that is very important. So and when you do that, you are increasing your network, which is the third key point. So your networking is very important. It is not just that you're just reaching out to people and just sending that invite. No, you have to be in touch with people from that particular industry. You should be reviewing articles. You should be up to the mark. I mean, and especially if you, for example, if you want to get into the pharma industry, there has been a lot of especially in the US market, there has been a lot of change. We have major US biopharma companies coming to India. Did we all know that? We have BMS, we have Amgen. They have started their own offices in Hyderabad, and that is why the service industry has taken a back step. Yeah. So all these It's okay if you don't know the nuances of it, of course, that is understandable, but this is a big news. So which means there's going to be a lot of pharma, there's going to be a lot of investment within Hyderabad. So Hyderabad is the new Bangalore, you can say, for the
Correct. Pharma.
pharma
Yes.
industry. So you should be appraised with all of this, because and especially when you're new into, or if you're just starting your careers, your interviews are not going to be technically heavy. Nobody's going to sit and ask you that, okay, tell me the definition of this, tell me the definition of that. No, for me, it is whoever is street smart, who understands the industry, uh, who understands the industry well, uh, is the right candidate for me and should be confident. So if you don't know an answer in an interview, or for that matter, even in an HR interview, it's okay. You just say that hey, listen, I'm not very sure about the answer. I have, trust me on this, Anirudh. A lot of my interviewers have come to me and said that, Priyanka, he did not answer the question, but I still think that we should go ahead with this person because he has the gist of learning. That's it.
You are the people.
Yeah, the that's what. So when somebody is having 1 2 year, for not only freshers, but somebody is having 1 and 2 years of experience also, we understand that if somebody is trainable, we can, and has the and is open to learning, we are more than happy to get them on floor. You don't need like a rank holder, or we don't need a gold medalist. We are not in hunt of all these people, very frankly. That we all, so when I started off my career, even I was like, oh, okay, somebody who has got like a 9 percentile only is going to get into that job. Only that person is going to get that job. It is not like that. It is only about your willingness to learn, and then at the end of the day, your presence of mind. That's it. And you should be confident in whatever you know. We don't want Einsteins here. We are here to make Einsteins.
Correct. Absolutely wonderful. You have summarized how the hiring goes and what the hiring manager looks in a candidate, and that's what is missing. Actually, I mean, what I see is people are not ready to. I mean, they think being technically sound is obviously important, but it's not the only criteria, right? You should be street smart. You should have all those extra pointers or brownie points to get hired, right? It's because the tech would be with everyone, whoever sits in the class, at least 80%.
Exactly my point. Yeah, and not even that. So I mean, somebody sitting in the class must have looked, even if they are not, attentive for that 1 hour of your lecture. At least even if somebody is looking at the board for like 15 minutes, it's more than enough. But then at the end of the day, in the interview, I'm sorry to cut it short, but it was just Friday. I was sitting with two of our practice heads, one for forecasting and one for analytics. And the practice head for analytics had just entered. I was actually sitting with a director, and he just entered the director's cabin, and he did 4 hour long interviews for IIT Madras.
Oh.
And now you guess what must have been his reaction. I'm talking about BTech, MTech both, but then IIT Madras. He came in, and then he firstly looked exhausted. So I said, hey, what's up? What is wrong with you? Why do you look so stressed? So he says, Priyanka, I did 4 interviews for 4 long hours. So, oh wow, very nice. How many did you hire? He said, none. I said, which campus? So he says, IIT Madras. And I said, are you serious? So he says, we don't have good candidates. So I said, that's not possible. What are you saying? Because all the scores are like, on 60 people have scored 58 and 59, and for some matters even 60. I mean the aptitude test. But nobody could crack that interview.
Oh my God.
So it is all dependent on how confident are you while talking, how you put yourself in that interview, and how concisely you are answering. We don't want bookworms. We don't want your answers from your books. We just need to analyze, at least when we are interviewing, the main thing that we are looking at is how well you are able to apply your knowledge to a particular concept. That's the only thing that's required. It's a myth that we need people who have scored, like, who are gold medalists and toppers. That's a myth. That's not true.
Correct. We are not writing research, right? We are not doing that. We want to have a conversation, and then whatever you have learned, that should be getting up. We just
Right.
don't want good answers on answer sheets.
That is not, you're not going to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely correct. $1 billion question. Do you hire interns at Farmers? Do you have fleet of interns? What is it?
Uh, Unfortunately, we don't hire interns. We do a lot of fresher hiring. That's true. Uh, I'll give you a logical answer why we do not hire interns. It's
Yeah.
because firstly, we deal with a lot of confidential data from all our clients.
Right.
So for us, if we are hiring interns, if at all, if we are hiring interns, it is from a perspective that we are going to give a PPO to that person. We don't do short-term, courses or internships, because there is no scope in the work that we do. There is no scope that somebody is involved with a particular project only for a couple of months or days. It's like these projects run for more than a couple of years. So a person working in a particular project has to invest so much of time, right? So
Right.
and we did not have like very good experiences with internship for a couple of years, and that is why the management has decided that we shouldn't be doing internship. But we are definitely up for freshers for hiring. That's something that we definitely take. I mean, all our forecasters, like today, if we say that we have the forecasting team, we have approximately 300 odd folks. So 50% of it is all that we have trained in house. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. What are the skill sets that you look in terms of the technology?
Uh, Again, so Power BI is important. SQL, Python, basic. Matlab, anybody who wants a career into analytics needs to have an understanding of Python and SQL. Data science, data engineering, these are the fancy words that we now hear, oh, data science course and data engineering course. So the ABCD for it is your Python and your SQL, your ETL tools. This is something that is this is something that by default it's registered into our heads, that by default I'm going to see these skills in their resume. So Python, SQL, your ETL tools, Redshift to some extent.
Okay, perfect. I mean, you have summarized, like we came all the way from HR and analytics and how things are being stored in quantitative and qualitative manner, to linking it with pharma industry and how pharmaceutical industry is moving in the data domain. I will just summarize that being active is the most important thing what you try to see within a candidate, whether or not he's able to have good conversation, his street mark, how clean is his or her LinkedIn profile, what are the activities that they are doing on LinkedIn, are they liking the research blogs or something which shows their interest in the domain is what you have highlighted, apart from the traditional skill what anyone could possess. One question before we move on to we'll open the floor for everyone to ask questions, is that lot of times I hear this from the learners and the candidates that I am trying to apply, but probably my ATS score is not well, the board is not letting me and I am not getting any calls from the recruiter. Would you love to highlight, like, do you do the scoring, or how is, like, because in any company, like even we hire for analytics role at a very nascent level, openings, like it is just one opening and then you are bombarded with around 500 to 700 applications in a day.
Right.
How is the flow? Like how do you filter down? What are the first one, two, threes to boil down or cut or red flags in the resumes or CVs, and then you shortlist? You have already given the number in the beginning that from 160 to 100 to 80 to 40 on the floor. But what are the criteria to cut this down?
So you are right. We get almost 500 to 700 applications in a particular day, but very frankly, Anirudh, it is only like 5 odd people who are going to be shortlisted, not more than that out of the 500, 700. So for me, the criteria for a resume to be shortlisted again is it should be concise. Resumes that are 3 pagers, for that matter, even 2 pagers, a big reject. Because so professionals with there's this concept, right? Professionals with up to 5 years of experience or 6 years of experience should have only a 1 pager resume, not beyond that. What? Because then it's very simple. Then we actually understand that okay, so this person knows what he's done in 5 years and he's able to,
Yes.
fit it in 1 pager A4 size page. That's it. Somebody having like a 2 and 3, so somebody who's at an executive level also wouldn't have a resume or a profile that is 2 pager. You should, that is going to talk volumes about you, firstly because then I understand that your communication is good. How? Because you are able to articulate your thoughts. You have put in your thoughts into that 1 page. You know what words you need to use. You know what you need to highlight. So
Yes.
anybody's resume that is 1 pager, it's the first. That's the you are shortlisted on the first checkbox. You have ticked the first checkbox. Secondly, very important, very silly. It's like a very small thing, but what kind of fonts that you use in your resume is also very important. I'm very critical. With experience, I've become like really critical. Somebody who's having a lot of colors into resume, 100% is going to get rejected. At least if you are applying to Commerce, you might get rejected because using colors in resume is a big no-no. You have your black and white profile. Resume. We are okay with it. Again, highlight whatever you want the HR to read. That is something. It's again very important. Looking at a resume, you understand. You'll if you have like a 1 pager thing and if you have highlighted your key skills within your experience, you are shortlisted. It is a very big myth to write about of course you write about your achievements, that you have published a paper, etc. All these are your achievements, I understand, but writing that I scored the first place in a quiz competition, for example, or into a what do we call this, hackathons and all, writing one of the securing first place and all, it's not very professional. You talk about it when you're interviewing, because of course your interview is going to ask you that the first question that an interviewer asks is, tell me something that's not in your resume. So you have to put things in the resume only for the HR to shortlist it and not to do all the talking, because then what are you going to do in the interview?
Correct.
Right?
Makes sense.
So have that 1 pager. Please work on having only 1 pager resumes. It's very important. Don't have 2 and 3 pagers. If you think that it's going to help you get shortlisted in any big organizations, that's not going to happen. Go have I'm not very sure. One quick suggestion: do have your LinkedIn profile as premium accounts, because you get a lot of insights when you're a premium account holder. You get access to you can network well. You get access to a lot of people from a particular industry you can connect with, and it's again human psychology, Anirudh. So if you have a LinkedIn premium account, we understand that a particular person is serious about, it's more towards he or she is more active towards networking and connecting, and you get a lot of articles, you get free what do you say,
The course.
certifications. Yeah, you get a lot of free courses when you have a LinkedIn profile. So one suggestion to everybody is that you should spend some amount on having a LinkedIn premium account. It really helps. Yeah, so the resume thing I covered. When I'm talking to, so if you uh, are moving to the next step and you get a call from HR, um, you don't have to. The more casual conversation you are having with an HR, the tendency for you to get shortlisted to the next profile or to the next step in the hiring process is more. By casual, I mean, I don't mean that, hey, hi, what's up with you? That's not the way I'm expecting. Um, you shouldn't be saying that if the HR is asking you, tell me something about yourself, you shouldn't be saying that, thank you for giving me this opportunity. No, I mean, um we saw something in your profile and that is why we have given you a call. Uh, it's by casual and candid conversation, you should ask, you should greet the HR very well that, hi, how are you? How has your day been? That is a more comfortable way of starting the conversation, not only with an HR also, but also with your interviewer, because then it shows how confident are you. If when you start off the conversation by saying, hey, thank you for giving, we know we have a lot of sites and applications uh, that gives you your introductory paragraph, which states that you should say that, thank you for giving me this opportunity. No, we don't want that. The way me and Anirudh are talking now, if you try creating a conversation like that, that that is something that is going to catch the attention of the HR, because not everybody can do it. Not everybody is firstly, yeah, firstly, you getting a call from HR, you are nervous, you are anxious, but then to keep calm in your nervousness and anxiousness is something, it's a skill in itself, which is again very important from an
Correct.
HR perspective. So I know, okay, this person is sensible enough to at least greet me and knows how to talk. So you getting into an organization, it's easy. You can get into an organization if you're clearing the interview, but sustaining yourself in that organization and growing in a particular organization is very important and the most difficult task. And all these skills, when as an HR I'm going to evaluate, I have these, all the HRs for that matter go and give the feedback to the interviewer stating that, hey, listen, this candidate has a good attitude, so I don't think you need to worry about the attitude. I've already done that check on him. You just look at the technical part and we'll just hire this person. The decision is made in the first few couple of calls that, okay, we are going to hire this person. And very frankly, I'm telling you, that is how it works.
Because at the end, I mean, what is an interview? It's just a conversation to getting to know each other professionally, so that, I mean, we'll be able to work together or not. Right?
That is
Work
it.
is just a part of it,
Yeah.
but the conversation is important. What we
Very
are
important.
doing with the clients, colleagues, the managers.
Exactly my point. How
and
well you
others.
how well you are able to maintain relationship with your, not overdoing it. We are not expecting you to be friends. Your professional and your personal life should be different, but then having a cordial relationship when you are working, and because you're spending like maximum of your time in a workplace, because giving 9 hours or 10 hours to a particular organization in itself is a very big task. So you should be able to adjust, and you should be able to talk to people around you. You just can't sit at the desk and work.
Correct. I mean, in 24 hours, the calculation is pretty clear. Like,
Yeah,
the
half of your
people-
life. Yeah, half of your life you're spending at work. So
more than half, more than half. Rest of is 25% is just sleeping, right? Get 4 hours of evening dinner at your place with family. Apart from that, 2x of it is what you are
at
sleeping.
work. Yeah.
Things that work, right? So it's very important what an HR would bring in a company to have that culture build. So I mean, it is very important. A lot of times, what I see is people don't check about the company which they are interviewing for. They don't know They don't visit website, they don't visit their
Yeah.
LinkedIn, they don't visit their
Yeah.
social media, and they are just right in there and sitting there for the interview. How can we hire someone who's not serious and not have digged in
At
about
least
that?
go through the website. Yeah, exactly. We don't expect anybody to know what who the director is or who the management is, etc. But
Correct.
at least know what the organization does. Basic. I mean, if it is into service, if it is into product, if it's product, what kind of products, if into service, what kind of services. That is it. We don't want a lot.
Absolutely makes sense. I guess we have very nicely. You have very nicely. You have not given me a lot of opportunity to ask you questions. Whatever I was thinking to ask you next, you were already answering it. So it was so nice to have a wonderful conversation covering all the spectrum in HR, in analytics, in pharma, and in general the perspective how candidate should be while approaching towards an interview at your organization and in general. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest with us today,
Thank you so
Priyanka.
much. Thank you so
Chat.
much. I
What
hope I hope it was insightful, and I think I did not uh, bug people in the because as a personality I tend to talk a lot, so I hope I did not bug
then it
the
was all
people and did not.
meaningful. It was all meaningful. If it makes sense, then it's very very good. Everyone can listen nicely. So I mean, it was all insightful, something new. What I mean, it's not just the same old things. What everyone keeps on saying. It was some different perspective from the pharma. As you told, the industry is very different.
Yeah,
Analytics industry is pretty huge, but within that service and within service, predominantly in pharma is very new. And your profile, I'm telling you, it's a very wonderful profile. It's very inspiring for a lot of learners because we get a lot of people from this kind of a background, from BSc, BCom, MSc, and as you started, it's a struggle for them to trust whether
yeah,
they are able to change or not, and then they try to think that, oh, why क्यों किया मैंने BSc,
yeah.
BC or something, it would have been a better, but you can make a shift,
You
and
can.
you are a very good example, and to see and to have to listen to you.
It is to some extent coming from how in general we are brought up and how our societal beliefs are. So as we were growing up, it was usually that you select engineering or you go into medical sciences, and if you're doing this and especially, I know this is like a very stretched topic of selecting those courses, but it actually affects. So I mean, that is what I told you. So I on my own, when I'm interviewing, probably now with whatever 5-6 years of experience that I have, if I'm going to go and interview, it's going to be more towards what kind of work I did. But
Correct.
when I started off as a fresher, this question used to be everywhere. Why did you take up MBA? Why did you take up MBA? I mean, it is not necessary for, if I've done my BSc, it's not necessary for me to do my MSc. It is as simple as that. That used to be my answer. So I said, it is nowhere mentioned that after your BSc you have to do your MSc. If MBA is an open course and if I have the eligibility, I just took it up. That's it.
And I feel you have a more cause, or people coming in from a different background than engineering are more hardworking because they know that this is not their domain. Probably they are more.
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh my god. Let's not even go there because I struggled with my accounts and my all these subjects in my MBA because I did maths only in my 12th, and then the next 3 years I did not do. I was not in touch with numbers at all. Like 3 years, no touch with numbers, and then achanak se you're doing bookkeeping and accounts and balance sheets. Oh my god.
Wonderful. So, bookkeeping and accounts. There's one question. How important is domain knowledge as a fresher if I am supposed to be interviewed?
Again, so as a fresher, when we are doing the interviews, we wouldn't be you wouldn't be interviewed on your domain knowledge. It's going to be more on your aptitude and your logical thinking.
Okay.
um, right,
Just-
because it is um, your aptitude and your logical thinking, your critical thinking is going to answer a lot of my questions as an interviewer, because I then know that you are able to apply your knowledge. So typically fresher interviews would have a lot of guesstimates, if you understand what guesstimates
Yes,
are. Yeah,
correct.
your
It's
guessing game basically. So they'll give you a random question that, hey, listen, okay, so if say for example you are staying in Pune, within Pune, if you're staying in Harapsar, and you have, you know, he'll ask you a question stating that what is the percentage you think Maggie is being consumed in Harapsar. Very,
correct.
I mean, very interesting question. And we just want to understand the logic that you use here. How
Thoughtful.
are you guessing? What is your guess game? So you have to think how many, stores would have Maggie, and what is the consumption. Okay, now Hadapsar, it's close to your IT park, so there's going to be a lot of young crowd. So 70% is going to be I at least know, so I don't want the exact number. Even if you're giving me like an approximate percentage of it, I know, okay, you are there, you can apply you can apply your knowledge, and you should be okay. Of course you will have couple of questions on your domain knowledge of whatever background you're coming from. A couple of those, I mean, out of the 1 hour of interview, hardly 10-15 minutes you would be asked domain knowledge. Rest everything, it's going to be normal conversation where you're given case studies, you're given guesstimates and aptitude questions, your percentages, calculate this percentage, calculate that percentage. This is what your interview would comprise of.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Makes
to
sense.
answer your question, say for example 25% of it only would be your domain knowledge. Rest everything, it's going to be your guesstimates and your aptitude and your logical thinking as a fresher. Of course, once you start gaining experience, and with close to 3-4 years of experience, it's more going to be on what kind of projects you have worked on. So how well you are explaining your projects, what kind of projects. So, and then also how deeply you know about that one particular client that you have been working.
Correct. Because that's why you
Yeah.
are going for his experience, right? So you should be
Right.
able to summarize it.
Right.
What are your weaknesses? Sometimes these HR questions are there. So what should be the polite answer to this? Is what Shubhangi is
Uh,
asking.
my weakness, again, it's very difficult, but lately I've started for I used to think I am not a patient person, but with spending some time in corporate, I understood that. So I used to consider that to be a weakness of mine. Now I think um, my critical thinking has been, so I'm not able to balance that. There are few aspects when it comes to HR as a function. There are few aspects that you cannot think critically, and you have to let it go, right? Because I am a critical thinker, and I am not able to get that balance into my critical thinking. So everything that is coming to me as a problem, um, I evaluate very critically, and sometimes I think I have to let it go, you know,
Ah,
and that is where. So if you tend to think a lot critically, and if you create those scenarios in your head, you are complicating a particular thing which is not complicated.
overthinking.
Yeah, basically that. So to have that balance in your critical thinking, yeah, overthink. That is a very big weakness, both professionally and personally.
So in general, to answer this question, when asked in an interview, you have to tell your strength as a weakness because it is overstrength.
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
mean, the standard answer what I would have given to such question would have been, I am a workaholic. So I cannot keep a task undone. That's my problem. I mean, how does the interviewer takes this answer? I don't know, but yeah, I mean, The trick, what I feel is that positive characteristic only you have to tell as a
Yeah.
weakness, but because it is excessive, so it
Hmm.
is a
So
problem.
yeah, I mean that is why you're not able to balance. So when you say you are a workaholic, you're not able to balance things. You know, you give your you're giving your 200% towards your work, but then there are certain things that need your importance too. So yeah.
Correct, makes sense. So one last question is what we have before winding up. How questions are based on projects that we did? This is
Mm,
what you mentioned for the laterals, right? That in lateral hiring, generally the people technical interviews they ask what you have done in the previous organization. So for I believe freshers,
mhm,
uh, the projects or the case studies what they have done while doing a
mhm,
course or while doing their degree.
mhm.
How confident they are, or do they ask questions around this?
Again, it's more going to be the result. I mean, the questions are going to revolve more around the uh, results of your or your assumptions that you came up with or your hypothesis versus the process. I mean, I don't think the interviewers would be inclined towards how the process was, or probably he might just ask you a couple of questions on how you did the project or what kind of, so say for example, I can think of my own project that I did. So the questions that were asked to me was more towards the kind of sampling etc that you did, but then I was grilled more on my assumptions and the hypothesis that I created. So it is going to be again, so that is going to why you get these questions, why they would ask you questions on the hypothesis and the assumptions, is because that is going to give us insights about how how you thought through or you designed the entire project. So that
Correct.
is going to be, it's not going to be like, okay, what process did you use, what were the steps that you followed. We are not interested, we are just interested into what you derived from that particular problem. So yeah.
Right. How you solve that problem, and in the
Yeah.
end, what you are saying is that it is just a topic of conversation because you have done that. So it
Yeah.
tells you
Yeah,
you are
it's just talking about what you did.
tell the story, right? What's the behind part of story while doing the project? The
Right.
hypothesis. Perfect. Now I guess we are done with the questions,
I
or
think
there
we
is
have one more.
yes. One question just popped in. I am from non-technical background. I hold a degree in BBA degree, and my profile doesn't fit into the eligibility criteria every time I go through the requirement of the company. So, to tell me how can I tackle this?
The first question to Durgeshwari is: are you tapping into the right organizations? Is the first question, because BBA is a degree that is acceptable in a lot of the organizations. So it's very important what organizations and what roles are you tapping in. So you might have to filter down. So there's a process again, when you're applying for a particular organization or a role, you need to have a particular understanding of what kind of work you need to do, right? And then you need to also understand the industry that you are getting in. So with a BBA degree, you might not end up into a TCS or an Infosys if that is what you are. It's just an example. I'm sorry, I'm not very sure what kind of industries you are looking at, but I'm just giving you an example. With a BBA degree, you might not end up with a TCS or an Infosys or a Wipro, because they do a lot of tech consulting, and into tech consulting they would need people from software and engineering background. But with a BBA degree, and of course what specialization you have done into your BBA, you have a lot of scope to get into the service industry and more into management consulting, wherein by management consulting, I mean, so pharma is again comes into the management consulting, where we are doing a lot of business analysis, and then we cater into a particular industry of pharma. So you need to understand where you can fit, where do you fit with your qualifications into this entire gamut of consulting or whatever industry for that matter you want to get in. with BBA degree you might not get into manufacturing again because they have their specific requirements. So you need to know what you want to do, and then probably if you need any help there, you can definitely get in touch with me on LinkedIn. We can figure this out for you.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. There's one question. How much it matters when you have education gap of 2 to 3 years?
Doesn't matter. It
Just
doesn't
to
matter.
justify it.
It doesn't matter because I myself have a year's gap. I took a gap after my grad to do my MBA. So I was a little paranoid about the decision because it because everybody else is going ahead and you are just staying. Matlab, you have taken a back seat. So I understand where you're coming from, but it doesn't usually matter. If you have a valid justification why you have 2-3 years of gap, I don't think it's gonna matter.
You should be able to have a conversation around your gap, how you did.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's all about how you articulate it. It's all about that. I mean, we are here. Everybody can go through something that is unfortunate. Everybody can take some time to figure out what they want to do in life. So all these aspects. So at the end of the day, even we are humans. We who are doing the interviews, even we are humans. So we understand the human aspect to it also. So it is just too hyped up that 2 years and 3 years of gap, people are not going to give you a job and all. It's just hyped up. You have a valid reason why you have taken a gap, and that's it. I am here to give you a job. You have to give me a valid reason for you to give a job. I don't care if you have 2 years and 3 years.
Perfect. Makes really sense. There's a thank you note for you from Durgeshwari.
Thank you so
And
much.
again, a big thank you from Fireblaze family. You have been very patient enough to answer all the questions past 7 as well. We have passed.
Yeah, I mean, we have passed 7. See, this is an example that I talk a lot. So
didn't realize how 90 minutes have been we've been into the conversation, almost 75 90 minutes we have had a wonderful conversation, lot of learnings from your journey from ESC to driving the recruitments using the tech in the pharma world. Thank you so much for
thank
being.
you so much, Anirudh, to have me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. Have a good evening and a good weekend. Thank you.
So thank you everyone. I'll just end the meeting now. Thank you so much everyone.
Thank you.